The Gospel portion for today is taken from the Gospel according to St. John, chapter 21, verses 1 to 14. In this passage, we see Christ appearing again to his disciples. When we read St. John, chapter 20, we see that Christ had appeared after his resurrection to the disciples. And as we read the end of the chapter, we see him revealing himself to Thomas, who was not present when he appeared before the disciples at first. He reinstates Thomas, and Thomas believes that Christ had resurrected. But when we come to chapter 21, we see that the disciples had returned back to their old jobs. They had returned back to their old ways. When Christ called his disciples, he called many fishermen. In fact, most of them were fishermen. And when he called them to be fishers of men. But when we look at the ministry of Christ and his disciples, the disciples were always present with Christ, but they are always seen to be running away or scattering at the very important moments. We can see that when Christ was taken away to be crucified, everyone scatters away, and Peter even denies knowing who Christ is. Once Christ appeared to the disciples in chapter 20, this should have been an opportunity for them to return to Christ's ministry. But instead of doing that, they returned back to their old meager jobs. And Christ uses this opportunity to reinstate the disciples to the greater mission, the greater calling that he had for them. In this chapter, we see that all the disciples had returned back to the ships, the boats, to catch fishes. But they couldn't catch any fish till morning. And once the man at the shore tells them to draw their net to the side of the boat, the right side of the boat, and they catch a mighty amount of fish. 153 fish to be precise. Biblical scholars say that this is the total number of variety of fishes that was found in the sea at that time. And it is a symbolic representation of including everything that was present in the sea. And Peter was the first one to realize that this was Christ indeed. And John presents Peter as the most loved disciple of Jesus Christ. We see that in 21 verse 7. Christ uses this opportunity to bring back the disciples and to re-establish the aim and focus that he had for them in their life. So I would like to share two things. Firstly, Christ's presence rejuvenates their lives. Christ's presence rejuvenates their life. The disciples had lost hope and the courage once Christ was crucified. But this appearance is an opportunity that Christ uses to rejuvenate the souls of the disciples and bring them back to the great ministry that he had called them to do. This was a call to come back and to make many disciples. So we see that Christ is rejuvenating the souls of the disciples. Secondly, Christ is reorienting their views. Christ is reorienting the views of the disciples. The disciples had lost faith once Christ was crucified. As they scattered, they did not know what to do. This was an opportunity used by Christ to reorient them to the greater task at hand. This Sunday, we are pondering upon the theme, dignity of labor and divine commissioning. The disciples were reminded that they had to do a big labor for Christ, and this could not be possible without his presence in their life. and Christ calls them back to the divine commissioning that He had entrusted to them. In our daily lives, we also have a divine calling and commissioning. But many a time, we do not realize that call and the divine commissioning. This second Sunday after Easter, the resurrected Christ calls us to be rejuvenated and to reorient our thoughts to Him. We might have encountered the pandemic and all the problems that brought in, and this could have taken us away from God and from His presence. But this Easter is a reminder that Christ calls us all to His ministry. We all are disciples of Christ, and we have been assigned the Great Commission. Let us all submit ourselves to work for Christ in His ministry. May God bless us all.